Welcome to another episode of Mining Now. Today we are featuring Nalco Water, an Ecolab company, and here to talk about their expertise and innovation in helping their customers manage their water is Steve Paulson. He is the Director of Technical Consulting of the Mining Division, and he breaks down the programs that Nalco Water provides for their mining industry. Before we can continue, let's thank our sponsors. First up, we have CIM. CIM is the leading membership organization for technical content and creating connections in the mining industry. Mining professionals and students can access a breadth of technical expertise through the CIM Technical Paper Library, the One Mine Digital Repository, the CIM Journal, the CIM Magazine, and also attend upcoming CIM webinars. Whether you're working in the field, in the office, or at home, join the community today and learn how they can help you achieve your professional goals. Find out more at CIM.org. Next up, we have Savinoy Equipment. Savinoy Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. You can visit them at savinoyequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. And last but not least, we have PowerZone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com. Well, let's get on with this episode of Mining Now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mining Now, a joint production of Crownsman and CIM. Today on the show, very excited to have Nalco Water, and my guest is Steve Paulson. Steve is the Director, Technical Consulting in the Mining Division for Nalco. Steve, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you on.
Thank you very much, Jared. It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, you've been in the industry a long time. So I first want, I mean, has it been about 30 years you've been?
I'll be coming up on 35 years or 36 years actually in the spring. So spent my whole career in the mining industry, and it's been quite interesting, I must say.
Of course, we're going to talk a lot about Nalco Water and some of the projects. Being a global company, I mean, we're going to cover from Australia to Saudi Arabia. So there's a ton that we're going to cover in the show. But I kind of wanted to go. I want to just kind of start backwards from how I usually start the show, because you bring this experience. Is there sort of that first project that you were involved with that stands out for you, that sort of start of your career?
Yeah, sure, Jared. The one that I think kind of stands out is early in my career. Before joining Nalco Water, I worked for 11 years at a mining R&D center, and we had a large field project in Arizona at a copper deposit there, where it was a completely new type of mining technology called in situ mining. And we went through all the laboratory studies and then scaled that up to the field and ran a very large field test at that particular site. And it was quite interesting in taking the concepts and the information that we had learned in the lab and applying it to a field situation and working through the challenges. There were permitting issues because it involved injection of a chemical solution into the ore deposit and then solubilizing the copper and pumping that to the surface. So there are many different aspects of the project, and it was really, really interesting. And you got a view of how complex, mining and mineral processing can be. So that was kind of my first big project, and it still sticks with me. I learned a lot that I've carried forward with me throughout my career.
How about when you get into a company like Nalco? When you started, was Nalco as large of a company as it is now?
No, actually not. I started with Nalco in 1996, and we were a standalone company traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And now we're a subsidiary or a division of Ecolab, which is a much larger company with Nalco as part of it. And so, there have been a lot of just rapid changes throughout my time with Nalco and now with Ecolab in seeing, the evolution of digital technologies and how they're being integrated into mining mineral processing operations and integrated into our business. So it's been quite an interesting career. A lot of really unique projects that I've worked on, and really it's been quite interesting to see how technology has really been used to solve problems, to improve operational efficiency and so forth. So it's been really enjoyable to be a part of that technology development and the application of that technology, to help solve customer challenges.
When you, I think I'll ask the same question, just for my own curiosity. When you transition to a company like Nalco, is there a project for you that stands out, that you kind of go, we're kind of in this now, like some of that large scale projects that sort of you cut your teeth with the company in?
Yeah. We made an entry into one area of mineral processing called flotation, and we really had a kind of a minor presence, and we really decided that was a good growth opportunity for us. So we partnered with a startup company that was based in Arizona, and we worked with them on some new technology. They had some patented technology, and we ultimately acquired that company and then brought that technology to the marketplace. So it really was an opportunity again to, be a part of something kind of from the ground up, right? And we have really kept our focus on that over the years, and it continues to be, a large part of our growth plans going forward. So that's a project that I really have drawn from a lot on my career over the years, because there were, like the previous project that I mentioned, there were a lot of different aspects to this, as well as taking some technology that had not been used before and taking it through scale up and commercialization. So really interesting project that's also stuck with me.
I wanted to, I've a lot of, Nalco is one of these companies that people within the industry, they know what Nalco does, at very least on a high level. And I and myself similar, that I knew what they did, but there's that chemical and chemistry component of the company. So I want to go into some of the, tailings management, foam control, the services that you're providing. But I want to sort of take that inner look at the company. What are they providing? What is Nalco's what are they offering to the industry on a holistic level?
Yeah, so really what we are doing is we are trying to help our customers solve problems, overcome challenges, and really just improve their overall efficiency and productivity of their operations. And so how we do that is with a combination of things. We typically have a chemical component, so we're using some type of specialty chemistry, and we're combining that with the knowledge and experience of our on-site sales engineers to understand completely what the customer situation is, what their constraints are, what their objectives are. And then we're supporting our on-site sales engineers with our technical support team that I lead, which are highly experienced folks that have been in the industry for a long time. And then we're also augmenting that with monitoring and control technology and automation and things such as that. And as I said before, we're now starting to integrate digital components into that offering. So we're not just supplying the chemical, we're really supplying the knowledge of what's the right chemical, where do we apply it, how do we get the best utilization of that chemical, with the overall goal to develop a better end result for our customers, whether it's a copper producer or an alumina producer or a gold producer. We've got a very extensive range of programs and experience that we bring to try to deliver, an optimum result.
Is most of this type of stuff, Steve, is it, like, I know in the agriculture sector, I mean, there's a lot of patenting when you're dealing with anything sort of chemical or combining different chemistries and things like that. I can't even speak the language properly, so forgive me. But is a lot of this type of thing, is it patented, and over the years as it develops, a company like Nalco will continue to patent these chemical compounds and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. We have a dedicated R&D team in the mining division, and then we have a broad R&D team across the entire corporation. And we draw on some of our anchor teams like our polymer anchor team or other, water anchor teams to help us come up with better solutions. But yeah, a big part of our success over the years and our future growth plans is to continue to develop new technology, better technology that helps our customers in their processing of ore or in the mine itself. But really, it's a key part of what we do, and that's been how we've continued to grow and evolve as a company, is using that innovation and new technology as kind of our benchmark, and then augmenting that with the expertise that we have of our people that are on the site, and developing a really thorough understanding of what exactly it is that our customers are trying to achieve, what's getting in the way of those objectives, and then how can we help using technology and using innovation to help get them where they want to go.
I want to transition, because now that you set that up, which was very helpful for me. I mean, of course, we do some prep before this interview, so I start to gain an understanding of the company. And I really wanted to sort of lay that groundwork before we move into where you actually specialize in the mining industry. And it's quite a list, so it's okay if we miss a couple. But can you I want to list off a few of the streams that you're in. And then I kind of want to talk about, and then I want to drill down into the different types of mines that you're operating in. So first off, can we go over, Steve, just sort of the streams that you're offering within the mining sector?
Yeah, so we have a lot of our business in the mineral processing plants. We have some applications that are actually in the mine itself, but a lot of the work that we do is in the mineral processing plant. So if we start at the mine, a lot of the issues related with mining and transport and handling of the ore, or finished products for that matter, have to do with, materials handling issues. It might be dust, it might be haul road dust in the mine, or it could be dust in a crusher. It might be on the other end of the spectrum that, wet ore is difficult to handle and could create, plugging of chutes and feeders and clogging and that type of thing. And so on the mining side, we have a number of different programs like dust control programs or wet ore handling aids. In some cases in the winter months, freezing is a problem, and wet ore will freeze, and so it's difficult to unload. So we have programs to make that ore, the handling of that ore, or coal in some cases, make it more practical in the cold winter months. So on the mining side, we have programs more focused on materials handling. Then when you come into the processing plant, there's a lot of different types of processes used to convert an ore into a intermediate product like copper concentrate, which then would go to a smelter and a refinery to convert it to finished, high grade copper. There's a lot of different programs that are used to help in the processing of the ore. So we have, flotation collectors and frothers. We have filtration aids to help with dewatering of concentrates, for example. We have products for thickening and clarification. Mineral processing is very water intensive, and so a lot of that water is recovered and reused in the process, and that's becoming increasingly important. So we have programs to help with the separation of solids from the water and the recovery of that water and reuse back into the process. A lot of these processes are conducted at very high or very low pH conditions. And so at a high pH range, you can get a lot of mineral scales that are forming. So we have programs to help with reducing or eliminating scale formation in the processing plant. In some cases, you have very low pH conditions, which create other types of issues. So we have different types of additives to help in those types of programs, like corrosion inhibitors, for example. So there's a lot of programs used in the processing of the ore, and then there's some specialty things. So in bauxite processing, they reprecipitate the alumina trihydrate, and so we provide crystal growth modifiers and hydrate classification aids. In some cases, excessive foaming is an issue. So we have a number of different anti-foams and defoamers. So really, at every step of the process, there are typically some challenges in the processing. And so we have developed over the many years that we've been focused in mining and mineral processing, we've developed a very wide range of programs to help alleviate those, bottlenecks or those pain points within the customer's operation.
Well, you mentioned the word programs a couple times. So when Nalco Water obviously there's a huge documentation component of everything that you're doing. Is it, when you say a program, how, of course you're dealing a lot with chemicals and data analysis and things like that. So it's nothing, of course, is physically plug and play. But when you go into a mining operation and then there's the float cells and the slurry and the going through the chutes and dust and so all these different layers, how do you even get to the point of knowing which program to plug in? And I know that's a big question, Steve. So, but
yeah, I think it's
start at that scale.
Yeah, great question, Jared. And when I say program, what I mean by that is, as I mentioned before, the chemical is just one component, right? When we talk about a program, it's selecting the right product. It's knowing where to apply that product to get the best outcome. It's the equipment or the feed system on how you apply that product, and then it's making adjustments after you get it applied to help to optimize it. So that's this kind of program approach. It's not just dropping off the chemistry and delivering it and then the customer's on their own. It's really being heavily involved in how do we apply it, how do we get it optimized, and then if something changes, which is very common in mineral processing operation, if a change occurs, how do we react to that change? What do we have to change in our program to still deliver an optimum result? So that's when I speak about program, it's kind of taking that holistic approach and looking at the chemistry, how it's applied, where it's applied, and those types of things. And then, your question around how do you even know where to start, right? Well, we've got decades of experience in mineral processing. And so we've got a global network, right? I lead the technical support team globally for the mining division. So we draw upon that global team and we've seen just about everything. And so when we're presented with a particular challenge at a customer's operation, oftentimes we've already encountered that somewhere else. So we know where to start. We may be able to narrow 30 products down to 3. And then we do our test work at the bench to identify, okay, which of those 3 should we start with? So we draw on that experience, and if it's something that we haven't encountered before, then that's where we interface with our R&D team to say, hey, look, we've got a customer challenge here. We don't think we've got something existing that will help us to address that and to overcome it. So that's where we might open up a new research project to develop something that would be a good fit. And we've got many examples of that over the years as well, where a customer brings a challenge to us, and then we've gone and developed a solution that's resulted in a good overall outcome.
I want to talk a little bit about the challenges, Steve, because the industry on a global scale, there's some similar challenges. I mean, you've got things like environmental, license to operate, water, these types of things. I mean, these are at the forefront in I pretty much every area of mining. And I want to, can you talk a little bit about those challenges just from the perspective of Nalco Water and how they're approached?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a global presence, so we operate in all regions, and you mentioned Australia, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and many places in between. So the challenges, can be unique from site to site. They can also be unique in one region versus the other, and they can be unique from a seasonal perspective, that in the hot summer months there are some challenges that may not be present in the rainy time. So there's some unique challenges, but then there are some overarching challenges for the industry that cut across different segments, that cut across different geographies. And you touched on a couple of those. That, as I mentioned before, mineral processing is very water intensive. So the availability of sufficient water is critical, and also water of the right quality to use in the process. So, and that's going to become increasingly challenging in the future. And Ecolab and Nalco Water has really committed a lot of resources to address future challenges in water. And I think that's a common theme that runs across many different mining operations and segments and corporations are, how do they get enough water to be able to supply the mineral processing plant? That water, in some cases, you're competing with other industries for that water, whether it's agriculture or industrial. So, there are some unique challenges there around water availability and water quality. That's a common challenge. In many cases, these operations are located in very remote locations, right? You're at high altitude in the Andes Mountains, or you're in the desert in Saudi Arabia. And so the remoteness creates some challenges as well. And then also, oftentimes when a mine opens, they begin processing the highest grade material, and over time, as that life of the mine is maturing, the ore quality is getting lower, the grade is getting lower. And so that creates new challenges in processing on, how do you best maximize recovery when you're in high clay ore, or when your head grade is declining over time. Oftentimes that requires to expand your capacity or expand your throughput. And so, there's a lot of kind of common challenges such as those that I think cut across different segments, different regions. And so, the experience that we bring is, when these new challenges are evolving, how do we get ahead of them, and how do we kind of see what companies are going to be challenged with in the next 3 to 5 years or in the next 10 years, and how do we get ahead of those so that we can have some solutions. But then also on the day-to-day challenges that they have, or the site-specific challenges, how do we draw upon our experience and upon our knowledge and upon our expertise in various areas as a company and bring that to bear on those day-to-day challenges.
You mentioned about, water it's because of your processing it's so water intensive, it's sort of that underlying challenge. Are those, is it more of a challenge than it was 20 years ago? Because, of course, I'm not going to ask you to pull a study out. I'm sure the study's been done somewhere, but on average, our mines, are they just operating at a lower grade now? Are there more environmental constraints? Is it noticeably different? Because you've been in the industry for long enough to know. Is 10 years dealing with water 10 years ago a different game than it is today?
Yeah, I think it is, and for a few different reasons. Number one, the size of the mines they've gotten larger, right? And for example, in Chile, the largest copper producer in the world, as the head grade declines there, they need to process more tons of ore to produce the same amount of copper as they did the year before, and so has resulted in expansions in processing capacity at these operations. Some operations undergo, a phase 2 expansion, a phase 3 expansion, so they're putting more tons of ore through to produce the same amount of copper in some cases, and so that requires more water. So I think as these operations have gotten larger, as head grades have declined, it requires more water. So I think that's the first thing. You touched on another, is the environmental controls. I think over time, environmental restrictions have gotten more strict, if you will, and so customers have had to evolve and kind of develop new ways on how they meet those environmental regulations that are put forth. So I think that's something that's changed over time. I think there's, as you mentioned, this license to operate. I think mining companies have definitely, seen the need to develop sustainability programs and things such as that. So most of the mining companies, they'll have a sustainability department, and it's part of their strategy on how what they're doing to conserve water, to reduce environmental impacts, and so forth. So I think there has been a lot of changes over time, and I think there will be more changes, of course, coming into the future. And it's just kind of the evolution of the mining and mineral processing industry, if you will. But I think that's one of the key things that we as a supplier to the mining and mineral processing industry need to continue to do is like I said before, to foresee what's coming in the future and to make sure that we can develop technologies that will help to address some of those future challenges that our customers will be facing.
Yeah, it's very well said, Steve. The joy of me doing this show is I get to sort of live vicariously through all these companies until the day. So I'm going to keep throwing it out there until a company takes it out, until a company takes me to just tour around with them and do shows at all these different sites. I have to just live through you. So
Okay.
I want to bring out a couple of examples because these, you know, I want to actually bring it into a real world scenario. So is there a couple examples that sort of stand out to you where there's a very specific challenge that a mine is facing, and then and Nalco Water has come in and be able to solve it, and then sort of walk through how that challenge was met and the solution that came out of it?
Sure. Yeah. We've got many examples. I'll give you a couple, right? So we oftentimes, we have a very strong on-site presence. So in most cases, we are making regular visits to a wide variety of mining and mineral processing operations. And when we're there, we're meeting with the metallurgy staff and the operations staff, and we're trying to understand, how are things going? What are some of the problems they might be experiencing? What do they need help with? What is it that they're trying to achieve, but they can't get there? And so, we've, like I say, many examples, but one of the more recent ones was a large copper producer, and they were having excessive foaming issues in their flotation circuit. And so we initially provided an anti-foam to help to control that foam so that they could maintain production levels. But really, it was not just trying to address what was occurring, it was trying to get to the root cause of why that was occurring. And so we did a very comprehensive study where we went in and we looked at the flotation circuit very closely. We took a look at the collector and the frother being used. And then we were able to go back to the lab and do some studies and then ultimately develop a new frother formulation that resulted in a significant improvement in the handling of the foaming issue. And so the program was implemented and there was a very good improvement. So that's one example. A second example is, a phosphate producer in the Middle East. And they, of course, it being in the desert area, it's very sensitive on how much water they're using and water availability. And so we went in and we did what we call a total plant assessment. We went in, we looked at all the water being used throughout the entire facility. And oftentimes there's different unit operations. So you've got the mine and they're using some water, maybe for road dust, for example. And then you go to the beneficiation plant where they're actually floating the phosphate minerals and they use a lot of water there. And then that phosphate concentrate then goes to the phosphoric acid plant where it's converted to phosphoric acid. And then ultimately it goes to fertilizer production. So we took a look at the entire, chain of operation and where all the water was being used, the inputs and the output. We looked at how much water was being lost to evaporation and what quality of water was being used for different types of applications there. And we came up with a plan with some very distinct projects that could be implemented to help save water at that particular operation across the entire chain of the operation. So some of those projects are being implemented currently and are resulting in significant reduction in the total amount of water that's being used in that particular operation. So those are a couple of examples where, we go in and we develop a good understanding of what the current situation is. And oftentimes I think, that's something that sets us apart is that we don't want to go in and start advocating a solution right out of the gate. We really need to understand the entire situation You know, anything that we're going to implement in one part of the plant, what would the potential downstream effects be? It's very important. We don't want to put something in early stage that's going to create problems later. So in my example, you know, we don't want to add something in the phosphate beneficiation process that's going to have negative impacts in the downstream phosphoric acid process. So it's taking a look at the entire operation and developing that understanding, and then from there going to say, okay, now we know, you know, what direction we need to go, and then taking it step by step. So those are a couple of specific examples. And as I said, we've got many, and that's really kind of our approach in many of these cases, is to go in, really understand what the current situation is, understand where the customer wants to be, and then how do we implement our technology and our people to help get them from point A to point B.
What kind of, I mean, not to get too detailed, but what kind of team does it take? You know, if you're sending a team to the Middle East and doing the whole process of a mine, I mean, are we talking 50 people and there's all these tools and gadgets that you're bringing with you, or is it 10 people? Like what sort of scale, if it's a larger scale mine, what would it take?
Yeah, so yeah, typically, you know, at most of the operations, there may be one or two sales engineers, and typically their background is in metallurgy or mineral processing or mining engineering, or you know, they typically have some type of a science background, because a lot of these mineral processing plants are very complex. They're, you know, it's involving, you know, flotation or digestion of a bauxite or a phosphate concentrate. So, you know, typically we'll have one or two sales engineers that are responsible for managing everything at the site, and they'll be supported by, in some cases, some on-site what we call application engineers, and these might be folks that have a really good background in equipment and electronics and so forth. So our feed equipment, they're maintaining that, they're calibrating it, they're checking to make sure everything is going properly. And then if there's a particular challenge or a problem, then we can bring in other resources like the technical consulting team that I lead, that have a lot of experience in many different plants, to bring some new ideas and some new approaches on how we can help to get things back to an optimum level. In some cases, we'll bring in our R&D team. So we have many cases where our researchers will go out to a mineral processing plant so they can see firsthand what's going on. If we've got a new program that we want to test, they may go out and do some testing there at the site. If we're going to run a plant trial of a new technology, we oftentimes will have researchers there, the technical consultants there. So we've got kind of a multi-level approach, if you will, and on how we help support our customers. And then, as I mentioned before, it's not just the mining team or the mining R&D team. We've got corporate R&D resources that we tap into routinely to help come up with better solutions. We've got a commercial digital solutions team, which is really focused on digital technology and automation and the like. So we've got a pretty broad network to draw on to help come up with a customized solution that gives the desired results.
Something that's always sort of eluded me, and it's one of these things, and of course, as we do more show, we'll bring in more people that unpack it for us. But the flotation part itself is always sort of, I have a basic understanding. Obviously, there's chemical components within it that separate out the product that you're wanting from the product but if there's an example of it, Steve, that would be helpful. Can you sort of go through when Nalco Water comes in, and that specifically the flotation, because it's one of these topics that I don't even know why it gets sort of breezed over. We get a lot of talk about, like, you know, the crushing down, the refining, all that sort of stuff, but the floats always sort of gets passed by. So can you sort of talk about Nalco Water's approach and sort of how it fits into the system?
Sure, absolutely. So maybe I could start with just a brief description of the flotation process. And you know, I'm sure some of the viewers already have a very good handle on it, but maybe others not so much. So maybe I could just kind of start there. And it's really a brilliant process that's used across many different industry segments. Froth flotation is used in copper, it's used in coal, it's used in phosphate, in potash, in iron ore. So it's used across many different segments, and it really is, in its simplest form, it's using surface chemistry principles to help selectively separate whatever that target mineral might be. So really, it's using air bubbles to selectively separate that target mineral. So I'll use copper as an example. Chalcopyrite is a copper sulfide mineral, is one of the more common copper minerals that you'll find in most operations. And so it's basically adding a chemical called a collector that makes the surface of that chalcopyrite hydrophobic. It makes it want to attach to an air bubble. So there are these large machines which are called flotation cells. The slurry, that the ore is crushed, it's ground, it comes into the flotation cell. There's a chemical, the collector, which selectively attaches to those chalcopyrite surfaces, making them hydrophobic. And in these flotation machines, there's a lot of air bubbles that are also introduced. Those hydrophobic particles that have been, imparted with hydrophobicity by the collector selectively attach to the air bubble, which then floats to the surface. So it selectively floats that chalcopyrite particle to the surface. A second chemical that's added in the process called a frother. It's basically a surfactant, and it helps it helps form a lot of tiny air bubbles, so you get a lot of particle to bubble attachment. And then as they rise to the surface, they coalesce into a stable froth bed, which is then recovered, and that's your copper concentrate in that example. And it's the same principle that's used in iron ore flotation or phosphate flotation or coal, fine coal flotation. Same principle, different chemicals, but the same principle. So when we go into a flotation process and we want to try to understand how we can improve upon that, we really take a very close look at the ore characteristics. We kind of use what we call MOC, mechanical, operational, chemical. So we take a look at the ore characteristics, the grind size, what gangue minerals or host minerals, if you will, are present. And then we take a look at the mechanical aspects. What type of flotation cells are they using? What type of airflow rates do they have? And then we take a look at the chemical. What collector are they currently using? What type of chemistry is it? The same with the frother. And then we take a look at the results. What are the results that are being delivered? In many cases, in North America and Latin America, it's not just copper only, it's copper plus molybdenum. Molybdenum is a very important byproduct. And so we'll take a look at what is the copper recovery and grade, what is the molybdenum recovery and grade. And then we will then, based on what we found and taking a look at the entire system, we'll then determine, hey, where do we think we may be able to make some improvements? Maybe we feel we can improve molybdenum recovery. So what would it take to do that? And that's when we'll go back into the lab and do our testing on ore samples and determine, can we indeed make an improvement? So it's really taking a look at the current situation, not only from, what's recovery and grade look like, but, what are the characteristics of the ore being processed, and what are the characteristics of the plant itself, so that we can understand where do we think that we might be able to make improvements.
So there was an example I saw going through the notes and prepping, and there was an example. It was I believe it was a coal mine, and it actually had numbers, which I found interesting, because a lot of times because there's NDAs and things like that, I don't get to see the actual numbers. And it was basically a revenue increase, I think of 1.2 million, and then like a cost decrease of like 1.4 or something like that. So it ended up being like a $2.5 million gain for the company. And I mean, I know it's not simple, but it seemed like when I saw it, because it was just an outline, it was like by adding just a frother, the right frother, that's what it took to make that difference on a coal plant. Is that common to be able to make those types of adjustments of what's being used and see those types of gains?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say it's common, Jared, but I think there are many cases where improvements can be made. And, a lot of plants, they've tried to optimize their performance over time by changing, the chemistry, changing the dosage and things such as that. And so, we always look for the ways that we can bring additional value through either better recovery or grade or more efficient utilization of the chemistry. It might be where it's being added and so forth. So it's common that we make some types of improvement. It's always not, millions of dollars improvement, but it depends on the size of the operation, and it depends on how optimized it currently is. And, one thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, the size of the operations has gotten larger and larger. So, for example, a large copper operation in Chile, their daily throughput of ore through the plant can be 120,000, 130,000, 150,000 tons a day. So when you have that much throughput, a relatively slight change in recovery is a huge number in terms of, tons of copper produced. And so that's what we're looking to see is, where do we feel that there's opportunities for improvement? In some cases, they've done a fantastic job of optimizing recovery and grade, and there sometimes isn't always room for improvement, but in many cases there is, and that's what we're looking for is where do we think we can make improvements? How would we do that? And oftentimes it's working closely with the customer. We don't come in with a silver bullet that hey, we can plug this in and you'll instantly see improvement. It's a process of working closely with the customer, trying some things, seeing what the result is, and then going back through another iteration to continuously adjust and modify until we can get, a better end result. So it's really a long process. It's a very involved, complex process, but we always look for those areas that we feel we can make some improvements, and then put together a plan of, how do we attack that, and then how do we go about working through that process.
There's a new topic stream, Steve, that's sort of developed into the show lately because we just had a previous guest on, and they do the hardware equipment, like screening and things like that.
Yeah.
So what they end up with is, as they evolve, they end up kind of circling back to all these customers to then upgrading their system. So there's this continual sort of flow, but that flow might not be. It might be a little bit different in your case. For them, they might not do that upgrade for, it might be 10, 20 years apart because of the hardware. But it must just be an unbelievable system that if you go to one area and then they upgrade, they add a new frother, well, and then now that's applicable to 10 other mines around the world. Where do you even start for that system to sort of, is that just a continual communication that you have over the lifetime of the mine, or how does that work?
Absolutely it is. It's a continuous process, and, the thing that's really interesting, it was quite interesting many years ago, working on a project at a mine in Arizona that was producing copper plus molybdenum. We introduced a new program there, and it worked very, very well. And we thought, wow, let's take it to plant B and implement it there as well. And when we went and tested it there, it didn't work well at all. And so it really opened my eyes that the site-specific characteristics, even though a mine is producing copper or copper plus molybdenum, there's a lot of site-specific characteristics that are really at play in what's the best program for that particular plant. The ore characteristics and the gangue minerals that are present, the water chemistry and the water quality, they have an impact, the type of equipment. So there's really a lot of factors that impact the overall performance in that plant. So, when we go from one plant to the other, we have kind of a framework of where we start, but really it's a pretty involved process of going through a number of steps and a number of iterations to ultimately come up with the best solution for that particular site. So that's something that we, the approach that we take. And then, I kind of touched on this briefly before. There are often many changes that occur at a particular operation. These ore deposits are not, large monolithic bodies. They have different types of mineralization, and so as they work through that ore deposit, the ore characteristics are changing, and as those ore characteristics change, so does the processing of that ore, and the challenges change. So it's really keeping a close eye and good communication with our customers on what's changing, what are the characteristics of the ore that are changing, or maybe some operational changes. Maybe they're installing new equipment, or they've decided to change the grind size of their grinding mills. And so really it's keeping a very close handle on what's changing and what impact is that change having on performance of flotation, for example, and then how do we help manage through that change to still deliver a very optimized result. So it's a continuous process, and it's always ongoing, and I think that's one thing that has really helped with the success of our company and our division is that on-site presence and that frequent communication that gives us these insights as to what's coming in the future, what's changing today, and how can we help manage through that change if that's needed.
I want to, when I wrap up the interview with you, I want to sort of circle back to Nalco Water and Ecolab, just to sort of get a full, an overview scope of everything. But on a ground level, but being such a large company that's operating globally, when you go to, you're sort of plugged into best practices, but then you're also this sort of diversity of culture and operations. Countries that have been in the mining business for hundreds of years potentially, and then countries that are just getting into it, and then they have completely different environments. I mean, is it always changing in that? Are you sort of always picking up, even as an individual and as a company, sort of best practices, and then, but also bringing in sort of new concepts of how to even communicate, because you're also communicating in addition to all of that, you're also communicating at an executive level and at an operation level. So there's so many layers to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you touched on a very interesting point there, Jared, is that, a lot of the new mines are that are coming online. There's a lot of challenges with starting up a mine and coming online. There are equipment challenges. There are operational challenges. And then in some cases, the experience level of some of the staff isn't they haven't been there for decades to understand everything about the plant and how it operates and get everything optimized. So that's where we really try to bring some of our global knowledge and expertise is, how do we help customers during startup period or when they're early stage on bringing some best practices that we maybe have developed in other places, and helping to bring some of that experience to bear, at the local level there. And it is a learning experience. We're always learning new things. And I think that's part of the thing that's made this business really, really interesting to me is it's very dynamic. There's a lot of changes, and you're always learning in this. And then one other point that you touched on, Jared, is, we've got this many different levels that we're active on. We've got the local site level where we're interfacing with the metallurgy team or the operations team. But then we've got, the corporate level aspects in terms of, where, as a company, where are they heading? What are their key objectives? What are their goals on a larger level? So we've got a team of senior salespeople called corporate account managers, and they do a lot of that calling at the corporate level, and have those higher level contacts where they're getting information, at the corporate level on where a company is going and what are some of their broader goals and objectives. And then they also get information from our on-site people at each of the operations on what are some of the projects that we're working on and what are some of the things that we've accomplished, at a local level, so that they can help to, bring that in a summary fashion to the people that they're interacting with also. So it's a really kind of integrated network that we have, and I think it's worked well. And as I said, we're always learning, but we are always trying to kind of get ahead of things so that we can be more proactive than reactive.
The organization of it, has it, I mean, in your how long have you been with Nalco Water? That's been, you said 30 years?
I'll be with Nalco Water coming up on 25 years in just a few months.
So
Quite a long time.
Yeah, tracking all of that and sort of integrating everything together. I mean, how different is it? I mean, of course, it's just the technology is so much different. But I mean, when you started 25 years ago, do you sort of look back and go, wow, like this is what's happened in 25 years?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I do kind of look back to see how quickly, things have changed. And I think in this age, I mean, change happens even more rapidly. And, one thing I touched on earlier is, integration of digital technologies. We're seeing mining customers, incorporating all kinds of digital technologies, whether it's autonomous haul trucks in the mine, or remote operations centers where they're running, the mining operation or the mineral processing plant from a remote location, right? And just the speed at which things change. So, we definitely see that as a big opportunity for us as well. In, how can we use real-time monitoring and sensing and digital technologies to deliver a better result, with the programs that we provide. And I think that's the thing that I find kind of the most interesting when I look back, Jared, is that, the change just happens so quickly now. And it's not just in mining, it's in all different types of industries and sectors, but it's been very interesting. And I think it's great. I think it's very, challenging, of course, but it's also, very interesting and great to see, how a lot of new things are brought to bear to help solve problems.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to do 3 different shows that sort of highlight 3 different industries. And so I get to sort of, I mean, in the studio, there's literally 3 studios that I bounce around to each one. And there's just common themes, but then there's this sort of feeling of one industry is sort of pulling one direction, and then a couple months later, it's almost like they're mimicking each other. You start to hear the same language coming out of the other industry, even though they're not really connected. It's quite interesting. And Steve,
Right.
I want to, before we wrap up, I do want to have, because we've talked about flotation, we've talked a lot about water. Can you sort of zoom out for a sec, just as we wrap up the interview, to kind of give that grand scale of Nalco Water, Ecolab? It's not just water that they're providing, and I want to touch on that before we wrap up the show. Could you give us that sort of that bird's eye view?
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned, as a company, we are really trying to address a lot of the challenges in water across a wide variety of segments. And whether you're at a mineral processing plant, or a paper mill, or a steel making facility, or a food processing plant, or a dairy or a brewery, one common element that cuts across all those different industries is water. And water's critical to many of those, if not all of those operations. And so there's that common element that really cuts across all of our business units within Nalco Water, is how do we help our customers manage their water resources more effectively? How do we help conserve water so that we can improve the availability of water in the future? How do we help improve the quality of the water that's being used, or quality of the water that might be discharged? So, at a high level, it's really focusing on water availability, water quality, and then within, each of the operations, how do we bring value to our customers? How do we help them, whatever it is they're producing, how do we help them do it more efficiently, more cost effectively, with lower CapEx, with better safety conditions, and that's really also kind of a common thread, but it's unique to each industry segment. So, at a high level, that's kind of our mission of our company, but we really provide value in many, many different ways across a whole range of different types of industries.
Is there an industry that you would say, if you were to rank them, I'm not going to get you to do each one, obviously, but is there an industry or a couple industries you think have the biggest challenge, either from the license to operate, water availability, these things that you touched on earlier? Would mining probably have the biggest one, or would there be another industry you think that would stand out as having that biggest water challenge?
Yeah, I think mining is right up there just because of the scale of the operations, and also the deposits are where they are, right? So a paper mill, they use a lot of water, but they are typically located near bodies of water, so they have water to take in and use in the processing, manufacturing of the paper. But a mineral processing plant, you have to go where the deposits are, and so I think when I think about it from like an industry standpoint, copper production is the largest two countries in terms of production are Chile and Peru, both located in quite arid environments. So I think copper production is going to be very dependent on availability of water, and having abundant water to use. Another one that comes to mind is phosphate production. A lot of phosphate production comes from Middle East and North Africa, again, very arid regions. And so water availability, I think, is going to be a continuing challenge there. But we see it in other, in other industry segments too. Gold production in the Western U.S. or in Western Australia, or bauxite production in Western Australia. A lot of mining or mineral processing plants are located in arid environments, and there are some where they have too much water and you have to discharge, but oftentimes it's arid environments. And so I think those are some examples where this issue regarding water availability, it's going to continue. It's going to become more important in the future, and different types of water and different sources of water are going to need to be used going into the future, and we think we're well positioned to help our customers manage through that.
It's Nalco Water is a fascinating company. It's you pick I'm glad we did it this way, because we really picked out a stream and sort of unpacked it, and probably could go even further. But hopefully at some point we can look at some of these other streams, including the R&D. I'm sure that's a whole fascinating topic, just in the type of R&D work that you're doing and collaborating with different operations around the world. So. But thanks for coming on, Steve. I hope we covered some of the important topics that we wanted to today, because it was quite an interesting conversation from my perspective.
Well, thanks very much, Jared. It was my pleasure to be here with you, and I hope we do have an opportunity to dig into some other areas in the future. I think, as you could tell, I really find this business just fascinating, and I'm very passionate about it. So I'd welcome the opportunity to dive into some other areas at some point in the future. But I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion with you today. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming on, Steve. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching that. That's yeah, it happens quite often on the show. It's like you roll back one thing and then you just want to keep going. So I tried to stay on topic there. But thank you for coming on, and thank you, everybody, for watching the show. We appreciate you taking in all this content. We're releasing a lot of episodes. We thought, well, if we start releasing 2 or 3 episodes a week, but we thought maybe we'd get less viewers. It's exactly the opposite. So thank you for recommending guests. Thank you for companies like Nalco Water for participating, CIM for supporting the show, our sponsors for helping us fund it. Thank you. Keep watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Mining Now.
Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you would like to be a guest on the show, whether it's Mining Now, Crownsman Energy, or The Crownsman Show, please contact us, info@crownsman.com. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors, and thank you to Nalco Water for joining us today. We will see you on the next episode.